everybody, and welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified. As I shuffle in my chair just a little bit, with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk, here in the southeast corner of Scotland, which of course is the capital of every single dimension possible, impossible, imagined, and real. So I hope everybody is doing well. I still have a pretty bad flu, cold type thing. Hence the coughing and stuff. And yes, I have a little bit of a fever. My temperature is currently sitting at 38 and a bit degrees Celsius. You can work whatever that out is in Fahrenheit. You can work that one out, but it is definitely above normal, which is fine because I'm not normal. So it kind of fits, really, doesn't it? So, but anyway, we're here. I'm here. And I'm here for you for Songwriting Simplified, where we can talk all things songwriting, composing, arranging, music theory, lyric writing, melody writing, writing for strings, writing for horns, writing for orchestra, whatever it is that you have in your minds that you would like to ask about. And if you do have a question, you can do it by asking in the chat. So if you are new to the show and you are watching and you are not subscribed to the channel, you're not going to be able to ask a question in the chat just yet. The first thing you need to do is hit that subscribe button. Once you've done that, wait 2 minutes. And after those 2 minutes have elapsed, you will be able to get into the chat because the chat will miraculously open up for you, as if I had said, open sesame. And when that happens, you can then ask a question. Best way to do that is to start your question with @Jonny Lipsham Studios, so the little @ sign, Jonny Lipsham Studios. And what that does is that shows up my name in red. For me, doesn't show that up for you, but it does for me. And what that does is that helps me pick out questions from the general chat that's going on. So if you do have a question and you'd like to do that, that's the best way to do it. And I am all set up and ready to go to answer your questions. Now, we don't have a whole lot of people here yet. We've only got 11, but we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully it will grow as our regular people begin to come in, which would be great. Now, just to let you know that this is the last of what I'm calling the early shows. They're early for me, and they're early for folks in Europe and on this side of the Atlantic. On your side of the Atlantic, if you are in the United States, if you're on the Northern American continent, it's the same time as always, 6 p.m. Central Time. So it's just me that moves because your clocks go an hour forward, which means in temporal terms, the United States, Canada, North America, you move 1 hour closer to the UK. And so in order to accommodate that, I moved my show so that we make sure that every Wednesday and every Sunday, both of my shows are always at 6 p.m. Central Time, regardless of whether it's winter, summer, spring, or fall, whichever season it is in, whether the clocks have gone forward or the clocks have gone back. It's always 6 p.m. Central. Okay, so that way you guys in the United States don't have to think about it. The only person that moves is me. And so if you are in the UK or in Europe and towards the east and beyond, then yes, my show has moved 1 hour earlier for these last 2 weeks. That finishes today. Today is the last of those. So what will happen on Sunday is it will still be 6 p.m. Central for you guys, but for me, my show moves back to midnight UK because our clocks now go forward. So you guys move forward by an hour. So we were an hour closer, and now we move an hour. And so everything kind of goes back to the normal 6-hour gap between Central Time and UK. And I picked Central Time just because it's kind of easy. It's certainly easier for me to remember. So that's why I picked Central Time, because it's just easier for me to remember. But where if you're Eastern, then that means it's an hour earlier than 6 p.m. If you're Pacific and Mountain, it's going to be later than that. So do your math, look at dateandtime.com and check out what the time difference is for you. So that's that piece of housekeeping information out of the way. So with that in mind, our clocks go forward on the early hours of Sunday morning. So 2 a.m. our time in the UK, Sunday morning. That's when the clocks go forward an hour. So that means I lose an hour of sleep, which is a pain in the butt. But it is what it is. And so that's why my show will go back to being midnight. So with all of that in mind, because that happens on Sunday, 2 a.m. Sunday morning, that means that the UK Studio One meetup on Friday is 8 p.m. UK time, which is going to still be this 5-hour gap between UK and Central Time. So you're going to have to work out the math on that one. But I think it's around about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you happen to have a spare 30 minutes, 40 minutes, or an hour, maybe delay your lunch by an hour, and you can come and have lunch with us on the UK Studio One meetup, and we can talk Studio One, and, you know, we can think about what we might like to see in a future build of Studio One. You know, if you are a Studio One user and, you know, thinking about what could be added, what you'd like to see added, what new features you'd like to see, we can talk about all of those on Friday. So there we go. Let's see. Just Bob has a great question for Sunday Night Live. So yeah, that's a terrific question, Bob, but that's really a Sunday Night Live question because it's not really a songwriting question. But it's a good one. I like it. And I would like you to save that question and make that a question for Sunday. But I'd be happy to definitely cover it, but it's more a Sunday kind of question. Let's see. So we got Billy Morgan, who is first in the door as usual, followed by Kyle Tradusiak and Dave from Aurora's Boring Alice. And Paul Morgan is here too. Don Oliver is here. And the aforementioned Just Bob is here as well. And we got Brett Marla, and we got Tony Stringer in Cyprus. And we got Dwayne here as well, which is pretty cool. Yeah, Dave, you need to put at Jonny Lipsham Studios, not just at Jonny Lipsham. Let's see. Dave's question is, would. It's not what, it's would. Would the same bottom note on the fourth beat of bars 1 and 3 be considered pedal point or a suspension? It depends what's going on above it. If you've got the same chord, it's not a suspension and it's not a pedal point. It depends on the harmony, whether it's suspension or not. And it also depends upon what is going on above this bass note as to whether it's a pedal point. Because pedal points depend upon what goes on over the top. So, if you don't know what a pedal point is, I'll explain. And I'll demonstrate. So, if I take this C here, and then if I play a C major on top. Okay, so C with C major triad on top. But then if I put a D on the top, a D triad on top, and then an E major triad, and then I keep going up in whole tones. So I've gone up in whole tones. Now that would make the C at the bottom here a pedal point. So if you listen to the beginning of the song Jump, that synth intro, which is now pretty much famous, you know, as soon as you hear it, you know exactly what song it is. Those chords are changing over a pedal point. because the note at the base stays the same and the chords change on the top. That is a pedal point. You can also have an inverted pedal point. What's an inverted pedal point? This is where the note that is the pedal point is on the top and the chords are changing underneath. This is actually a really useful improvisational technique, and I use this a lot because it creates a whole bunch of tension. So what I like to do is I like to play a note, and then I like to take a stack of fourths and just move that chromatically up and down. Even if those stacks don't belong to either the chord that the rest of the band are playing on, or the scale, the mode that we might be playing on. So this is a practice I do a lot, especially if I've kind of come to the end of a bunch of ideas that I've been using for improvisation, and I'm kind of not sure where to go next. This is what I do to kind of build up some tension. So again, we'll take a C. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this stack of fourths and I'm going to move this around. First, I'll move it around diatonically using the Mixolydian mode, and then I'm going to do it chromatically as well, so you can hear the difference. So I will often mix those techniques up where I'm moving it diatonically and moving it chromatically. And the cool thing is, quite oftentimes the bass player will do a similar pedal point as well, or the bass player will try and follow my either stepwise chromatic or stepwise diatonic motion with those stacks of fourths. And even if those stacks do not come from the scale or the key center that we're playing on, that provides a whole bunch of tension. And then I can either launch into a new idea, or I can play some kind of pentatonic figure and try and develop an idea out of that pentatonic figure. So those are kind of things that I do a lot. That's what a pedal point is. So to go back to Dave's question, would the same bottom note on the fourth beat of bars 1 and 3 be considered a pedal point or a suspension? The answer to that is it depends on the context harmonically. Are the chords moving over the top, or are they not moving over the top? So that's kind of pedal points. What's a suspension? There are lots of different types of suspensions. The most common one is either suspended second or suspended fourth. You hear these a lot in popular music, but they derive mostly from the Baroque period. They were basically very popular from the late medieval period on into the Baroque period. Why is it called a suspension? It's called a suspension because it's a note suspended over from one chord into the next one. So, for example, if I was to do a plagal cadence, which is chord 1 to chord 4, and then I invert that and go back to chord 1, which is your typical kind of church amen kind of cadence, but I held that F over, that would be a suspension. So something like this. There's our suspension, because that F does not belong to a C chord. And that is a suspended fourth, because it's the fourth degree of the C major scale. But it belongs to the chord before it, the F chord. So And then the way that you would resolve this is with something like a mordant, which was, again, very popular in the Baroque period. So a mordant is basically is that. So that's my target note, and I'm starting with the note above, note itself, note below, note itself. And that was a really, really popular kind of late medieval, early Baroque period. Why were these things popular? Well, keyboard instruments back then did not have a whole lot of sustain. Like the piano has a lovely amount of sustain, especially with the sustain pedal. But back then, no sustain pedal. And, you know, you were talking about harpsichords or a clavichord. Harpsichord, it's basically a series of plectrums that pluck the strings. Clavichord, it's kind of some kind of bamboo, kind of wooden hammers that strike the strings, but the strings are really thin. And so you had to do a little turn like that or a little mordant like that to kind of fake that kind of sustain. And that's where trills come in as well. And then you might finish it with a mordant, so like that. So you can also get this from a dominant chord as well, with the 7 on the top of the chord. Same kind of thing from a perfect cadence. And that's a particular kind of harmonic idea that you hear coming up in ABBA songs quite a lot. So again, suspensions are popular in ABBA songs. Why? Because actually the songwriters in ABBA, I've forgotten their names now, but they are actually quite influenced by late Baroque and early classical music. It's one of the things that they are, you know, that kind of harmonic language they are really influenced by. So, you know, you would hear things like which you get from Dancing Queen, but it starts with the major third up to the sus4, which is basically a C major chord with the F instead of the E, down to the second, and then back up again. So you've actually got two different suspensions going on there. And the second, so you got major, sus2, sus4, sus2, sus, and then back again. So that's a suspension. So you can get a suspension where the suspension is below, but those are really rare. You tend to get these on situations like this, where the 7th, this is a C7 chord with the 7th in the bass. All right, so that's kind of a suspension. And that kind of goes to a first inversion F major, and then I might make that first inversion F minor, and then G7, and then there's my suspension again, and there's my resolution. So actually, more the question there, Dave, is what is the difference between a pedal point and a suspension? And there's your answer. Those are two kind of different, but yeah, they're not really related, but they are certainly different concepts that can be used together. Let's see. Roger Beckett almost got it right. You just missed out the S. It's studios. It's plural. Why is it called Jonny Lipsham Studios when I only have one room? And there is technically no other studio. The answer to that question is that when I first moved back to Scotland from London, there was a period where I had 2 studios. I had one up here and one down in London, which I had owned for quite a while down in London. And so what happened? What happened was, during that period where I had 2 studios, I had this one up in Scotland, one and the other one down in London. That happened for a period of about 3 years, and then eventually I sold my part in that studio because it was jointly owned with another guy. And so I sold my half of the studio to him, and now he fully owns that studio, and it has a completely different name. But that's why it was called Jonny Lipsham Studios, because I had 2 studios. And the name I just stuck with the name, even though there's only one. Thank you very much, Bob. He says he sent me an email of the question. Thank you. I appreciate that. With the screenshot. Cool. All right. Excuse my snorting. Roger Beckett says, can you explain negative harmony and how would you use it in a song? Negative harmony is an extremely complex, it's an extremely complicated concept. Probably slightly out of the scope of this show, because it's Songwriting Simplified rather than Songwriting More Complicated. But yeah, negative harmony is probably, it's not something you're ever going to come across if you work in, it's not something you're really going to come across or run into a need for in most popular song styles. So if you're writing pop songs, R&B, folk, rock songs, heavy metal, it's not really something you're ever really, or jazz, you're never really going to encounter negative harmony very much. So the best place to start with this is always to start with defining things, getting a correct definition. So I'm going to look up the musicological definition, the exact one, not one that I just kind of try and remember, but I'm going to look up exactly what this is in dictionary terminology. So this is what the Oxford Dictionary of Music has to say on the subject. It says, in music theory, negative harmony, also known as inverted harmony, refers to a technique where chords and melodies are generated by inverting or mirroring a given chord progression or melody around a specific axis, which is often the axis between the tonic and dominant notes. So, there's a bunch of terms there. So, let's talk about the first part of that. Inversion/mirroring. So what is this? So the core concept here is to take a melody or a set of chord changes and flip it, which basically therefore creates a new set of chord changes that is obviously related to the original set of chord changes or the original melody, but it's different. So you're just basically flipping it. You're inverting the musical idea, whether it's a harmonic one or a melodic one. So that's that. The next thing you need to talk about is the axis of symmetry. So what is this? So the axis of symmetry is kind of between the tonic and the dominant notes of the key. So if we're in C major, seeing as that's kind of where we started, here's C major, and here's our dominant, G. So halfway between there would be the third of the scale. So how does this work? Well, the negative or inverted chords can be used as substitutes for the original chords, creating a unique and potentially unexpected harmonic sounds. So, for example, let's say you have C, A minor, D minor, G7, C. So the first thing you need to do is you need to modally flip each of those chords. So that means making every major chord a minor chord and every minor chord a major chord. So if we have C major to start with, we need to make this C minor. And then the next chord was originally A minor. Now we make this A major. Then the next one was D minor, so we make that D major. And then the next one was G dominant, which we are going to make. We can change that. We can make that G minor 7. All right, so we go. So this is a really cool idea if what you are wanting to do is just take an idea that you already have and reverse its, it's a little bit like modal interchange. It's related to modal interchange. But what we're doing is we're changing a major to minor and a minor to major. So the negative of a major chord would be a minor chord. Equally, the negative of a minor chord is going to be a major chord. So if your song is in, say, C minor, and maybe those are your chords. So you got C minor, F minor, C minor, G dominant, C minor, pretty straightforward. Or maybe we do something like this. We go C minor, B flat over D, to E flat, to F minor, and then to G. So this is kind of a little bit kind of hymn-like. Whoops. There. So that's a little bit hymn-like. So let's change that up. All right, so we've started minor. So we turn that one to major. The next one was B flat over D. So that's now got to be B flat minor over D flat. So, and then the next chord was E flat major. So then we go E flat minor. And then the next chord was F minor. So we make that F major. And then G7, which we now going to make G minor. So out of a musical context, that sounds weird. So that's how you would do that with chord changes. And then with melody or a melodic idea, it's pretty much the same, except this time you're dealing with a melodic phrase. So think about the intervallic relationship between the notes of your melodic phrase and whether those are a major or a minor interval. All right, so if you're spelling out the C major arpeggio, then you want to invert that. Okay, so this is kind of the idea of reversing the intervallic relationships between chords and between melodic ideas. So if it's major, flip it to minor. If it's minor, flip it to major. So this kind of idea is very, very popularized at the moment by the genius that is Jacob Collier. By the way, speaking of Jacob Collier, he has just put out a video where he improvised a piece entirely Nothing written out, no cheat sheets, with the National Symphony Orchestra of Great Britain. And it's incredibly good because he basically improvises an accompaniment to him singing a well-known song. I'm not going to spoil it for you because I think you should go watch it. It's on Jacob Collier's YouTube channel. Go watch it and watch how he puts the whole thing together, how he has the different parts of the orchestra playing different notes and how those relate together. And it basically shows how he thinks harmonically, that he hears these things in his head and he can identify the pitches and give those pitches specifically to different parts of the orchestra, and he knows that they're going to work, they're going to fit. And he is making it up as he goes along, and it works beautifully. It's a phenomenal performance that he puts on. So he kind of popularized this idea, but it's been around for a while. The concept was first really kind of described by a musicologist called Ernst Levy. And so if you want to dive in deeper into negative harmony, it is well worth doing a little bit of research and looking up musicologist Ernst Levy. His last name is spelled Levy. Ernst Levy. And it's very well worth checking out his ideas and his concepts of negative harmony and the whole idea of inversion and mirroring and functionally substituting original chords by reversing the harmonic content of each chord to create something new out of something that you already have. It's a really, really cool little songwriting device. Like if you want to create a natural variation of what you already have, you're basically creating something new without actually having to do very much work at all, other than to work out what you reverse or what you invert. So that's kind of the idea. And it's actually quite easy to put it into practice in quite a simple and yet effective way. Take chord changes that you already have for your song and invert them. If they're major, make them minor. If they're minor, make them major. And do the same with the corresponding melodic ideas that are going over the top of your chord changes. So if your melody was originally major over a particular chord, then you invert the chord and you invert the melody. So you make that a minor third and not a major third in the melody as well as the chord. And so this is one simple application. There are many, many, many other applications of negative harmony, but this is one particular way that's actually quite easy to apply to your own songwriting and very well worth getting at least a grasp on. We've got 20 people here now, but we've only got 10 likes. That means only half of you that are watching are liking this. So, it's fine. I prefer you to be honest, but likes also help. Believe it or not, likes actually help the channel, because what that does is that promotes my videos to the YouTube algorithm, and the YouTube algorithm goes, hey, there's a bunch of people that like this stuff. And then it might make its way up onto the YouTube homepage, which, by the way, my videos have been there a few times now. They've actually been on the YouTube homepage thanks to you guys hitting that like button. So it does help. It does help a lot. And then that means that my videos get a lot more views, and then hopefully a lot more subscribers. And then that means this audience grows. So it's a very cool way of growing this channel. So please do hit that like button. I appreciate it enormously. Brett says perhaps the S at the end of studios isn't a plural anymore, but is an S for Scotland. Maybe. I'd have to capitalize that S then, wouldn't I, at the end? The W5 family are here. Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are okay. Roger Beckett says it sounds pretty cool. He says, I'm guessing that what they also call reharmonization. It is one form of reharmonization, but it is not. That's not reharmonization in its entirety. It's one small part of reharmonizing. But yes, it certainly can be an application of reharmonization. It is something that I do sometimes if I want to create a natural variation without actually having to do any work for it. So it is actually pretty handy, especially if I'm writing something. If I'm writing something for film, for example, and I know I have a specific amount of time that I have to fill with particular music at this tempo and in this particular style, in order to make it quick and easy to write, this is where I start to go and take material that I've already used in the film so far, and I might invert it, depending upon what's going on screen, obviously, but it's definitely a technique that I can use. Like if part of this film has, maybe one of the star characters in the film has had a happy experience in the film, and suddenly something bad happens to them, I might take harmonic and melodic motifs and ideas and chord changes that underpin their kind of thematic material, and I might actually invert it and, make some negative harmony and some negative melody out of their original thematic material to denote the change in their fortunes through the story. And I'm not the only film composer that does that. Hans Zimmer does that a lot. John Williams does it a lot. Listen to just how John Williams uses Leia's theme throughout all of the Star Wars films as you see her character unfold and develop, and the things that happen to her, you notice how he actually turns that theme sometimes upside down and changes the mood of it to fit what's going on in the character's life and the character's life throughout the film. It's a really, really handy thing to be able to do. Just Bob says, Suspicious Minds refrain sings the same lyric over and over. Why hasn't anyone written a song based on the refrain playing over and over and build musically each resolve? Actually, plenty of people have done that, Bob. Elvis was definitely not the only person to do that in that particular song. There are a lot of other examples of the same refrain being used over and over again, and then building musically by using tools like reharmonization that we've talked about before. If you ever have heard live recordings of the Beatles playing Hey Jude, or Paul McCartney and his band playing Hey Jude, which he still does from time to time, quite often they will reharmonize on every repeat. So the melody stays the same, the chord changes change underneath, which gives the melody a fresh sound, so to speak. So it's actually a popular thing to do, and you actually find this is a popular technique of hymn writers as well. So don't discount, if you are wanting to learn songwriting and arranging and, the craft of doing that, I definitely recommend, even if you're not Christian, it doesn't matter. You can discount the theological content of the lyrics if you want, but don't discount the musicological and literary content of hymns, because there is a lot that is good. There's a lot that is great there. Because quite oftentimes what the organist is required to do in the last verse of a hymn in particular is they will open pretty much all of the stops of the organ, and then they will reharmonize. Particularly, they will reharmonize the last two lines of the song, of the hymn. And they may even repeat the last couple of lines a couple of times, complete with things like what we would call in kind of jazz parlance, we'd call it a backdoor 2/5. What is a backdoor 2/5? I hear you ask. Well, if we're in F major, you would do D flat, F, which is basically flat 6, flat 7, 1. Okay? We call that a backdoor 2/5 in jazz circles, but technically this is a Neapolitan cadence. Or you can shorten it just by doing this. For example, I'm going to change key for a moment. I'm going to go back to our key of C major. So we're in C major. I can shorten that Neapolitan cadence by doing a first inversion D flat triad, and then I can go to my 5/1. So basically this D flat over F substitutes for chord 2 all right, so that is essentially a backdoor 2/5, but you get this in hymns a lot at the very end. Like instead of doing the perfect cadence or the extended perfect cadence, which would be 2/5/1, they would do. If you want to hear a great example of a backdoor 2/5 to finish off a song, check out the Star Trek Next Generation theme. Because it finishes with that. Although it's kind of a slightly harmonic extended version of that. But that's what you get. You also get that, by the way, in Star Trek Voyager at the very end as well. It's another backdoor 2/5. And it ends on a nice little pretty major 7. So there's a good couple of examples from, modern contemporary music and film music and TV themes where some of these concepts are used. Good questions. Good questions. Roger Baker says Dirty Loops do that as well. They do a lot of very extensive reharmonizations. Definitely. For example, who's the female singer that had a massive hit with a song called Hit Me? Who was that? I have a feeling it's Britney Spears. But Dirty Loops had they did a version of Hit Me, which is absolutely astonishing. Just the reharmonization alone is amazing, but the groove that they gave it as well is spectacular. Star Trek The Motion Picture, same piece. It is indeed the same piece. Yep, Star Trek The Motion Picture is the same music as was used in Star Trek Next Generation, with a couple of very, very, very subtle changes. If you listen carefully, you can hear that there's a couple of subtle changes to both the melody and the chord changes. When you go into the middle section, the B section of that theme tune, there's a little bit of a change for the Next Generation theme tune compared to the motion picture theme. Dave says that's where the phrase pull out all the stops come from. Exactly right. It's an organ playing term. David Foster does backdoor 2/5s a lot. Yes. Brett Meyer's talking about Hit Me Baby One More Time. No, that's not the song I'm thinking of. It's a different song. Different song. It's just called Hit Me. It's not Hit Me Baby One More Time. It's just called Hit Me. If you search up Dirty Loops Hit Me, you'll find the video I'm talking about. The The reharmonization is stellar, and of course Jonas's voice is astounding. But so's his keyboard playing. Yeah, Hit Me Baby One More Time is definitely a Britney Spears song. Yes, it is. But yes, I'm not thinking of that song. Just Bob says, seems to me that simply writing a refrain that builds would be a great crowd pleaser and rest for the band members while entertaining the crowd. Makes it their show in any way. Yes, kind of does. Yet Dirty Loops also did Circus by Britney. Yes. That's also a fantastic reharm. So if you want to check out some really, really good contemporary reharmonizations of pop songs, that's one place to go. The other place to go is a record made, I think, 2003. So yeah, 22 years ago now, by Herbie Hancock with Michael Brecker and Jack DeJohnette on drums, and I can't remember the bass player for the life of me. But it's called New Standards, and basically they did a whole bunch of kind of contemporary jazz arrangements of songs by The Clash, Jimi Hendrix. I think there's a couple of Beatles songs in there as well. There's like a whole bunch of well-known popular songs that they just did very, very cool, sophisticated jazz reharms and reworkings of, and they called it the New Standards. It's very, very cool. And of course, Michael Brecker's playing is just simply out of this world. Without doubt, the greatest tenor sax player to ever play the instrument. All right, so we've got 10 minutes left, folks. And I'm still hanging in there, just about. So we got 21 people here, which is pretty good. We did have like 22 people here a minute ago. But 20 is great. I will take 20 for sure. So if you are new and you're watching and you'd like to at least say hello, even if you don't have a question, please just say hello. I like to get to know you. So please do subscribe to the channel. And then after a couple of minutes, you should, in the short time we've got left of the show, be able to introduce yourself in the chat. And I'd love to get to know you because I like to get to know the people who watch my shows, and because that way I get to know the community. Hang on, my chair is stuck and I don't know what I'm stuck on. But yeah, I like to get to know and build this channel, not just as a channel, but as a community as well. Man, what am I stuck on? Hang on. Oh, I know what I'm stuck on. There we go. I know what I've just figured it out. The plastic mat that is underneath my chair to stop my chair from digging a trench in my carpet got stuck underneath the wheels. So that's what that was. How would you arrange strings for a song using counterpoint? Okay, well, first of all, we got to define what counterpoint is. Counterpoint is a very, very cool concept. What is counterpoint? How does it work? Counterpoint is more than one melody at the same time, essentially. That's kind of, if you were to sum it up into one sentence, that would be it. More than one melody at the same time. And so you hear this most particularly in the kind of popular domain when you were a kid, if you sang Row, Row, Row Your Boat. If you do that and you have like 5 or 6 people in a group and one person starts and then the next person starts after the first person has sung the first line, and then each one goes down the line that way. So the first person starts off singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. gently down the stream. The next person then starts singing the first line as the first person starts singing the second line. This is called a round. A round is a very basic form of counterpoint. And what you end up with is, because the melody is diatonic, in this particular case, you end up with little bits of what we would call incidental harmony. Why is it called incidental harmony? It's called incidental harmony because the two melody lines intersect each other, and sometimes they actually harmonize each other because they basically have the same rhythms. So there are points where they actually create accidental harmony. Okay? So we would call that incidental harmony, not accidental harmony. It's incidental harmony. And so that is one form of counterpoint. And you can use that idea. And in fact, you can hear this in Holst the Planets. In the movement Jupiter, you will find that there's this little that melody then gets passed around the orchestra. Trumpet starts it, then you get a horn that starts it, and so on and so forth. And then there's another theme which goes dun 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 dun, and then that gets passed around the orchestra. And it gets passed around by one instrument starting it, the next instrument starting it halfway through the first phrase, and so on. So it's done like a round until everybody's playing this particular theme. Even the timpani player at the back is playing that melody. It's amazing. And then it comes to a climax when everybody has finished playing it, and they essentially hold the note that they finish with to create this big chord. And then you get dun 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 dun, and then you get the very, very first theme of Jupiter restated very briefly, and you get to the end. So that is counterpoint. So when you're arranging strings and you want the strings to kind of be supporting the main melody, you can create two little pieces of melody that can be tossed between the different parts of your little string group. So if it's a string quartet, you can have maybe two violins, or maybe a violin, a viola, a cello, and a bass, or maybe you've got two violins, a cello, and a viola. If you know, that's probably the most usual configuration: two violins, a viola, and a cello to make up your string quartet. Well, what you could have is you could have your cello basically following the bass part of your song, or kind of stating the harmony, basically what the roots of the chords are. And then you could have these other three parts playing a three-part counterpoint, a three-part round. You could basically take three melodies and have them start at different points, and then have violin 1 start, then violin 2 start, then the viola start. And then they're all playing this one melody, and then you could bring in melody number 2 and do the same. So whilst melody number 1 is finishing, melody number 2 has already started, and then whilst melody number 2 is finishing, you bring in melody number 3. And you can have that all going on underneath this bass part. And this would be an example of a canon. And this is something that you get with Pachelbel's canon, which is probably the one that's most famous, that most people know about when you talk about a canon. That's what that is. Pachelbel's canon starts with this bass part, and then you add another melody, which is in half time compared to the bass part. The bass part is playing whole notes. The next part plays half notes. The next part plays quarter notes. The next part plays eighth notes. And then the part on top is a little bit more free, and then they all swap around. as the piece goes on. And so that's called a canon. But all these melodies are all happening at the same time. If you listen to New Orleans jazz, that's another example of counterpoint, where you have the melody maybe played by the trumpet, and then you have you kind of obligato melodies played by a trombone and a clarinet. And they'll be all playing at the same time. So there are some options for arranging strings using counterpoint. Brett says, couldn't having two instruments playing in different time signatures simultaneously, like frame by King Crimson, for example, be a form of counterpoint? It's not the same thing. Counterpoint is more to do with melody and texture than it is to do with time. But yes, you could certainly have metric modulations that take place at different times, which would create different cross rhythms. So that would certainly work if you listen to Steve Reich's music for hand clapping. So that's a good one to check out, because that actually has phrases which actually go across the bar line. He takes like a rhythmic cell and he shifts it. He shifts it until it's really displaced. And then there's another melodic rhythmic cell that then also gets displaced against it. And you end up with this interesting kind of rhythmic counterpoint. And it is kind of counterpoint because, you know, they're all kind of doing different things. That's what counterpoint essentially means, is doing more than one thing at the same time. That's what counterpoint is, fundamentally. So a contemporary example, if you're not into Steve Reich's kind of avant-garde kind of music, then you could certainly check out Spanish dance music, Spanish dancing music, like flamenco is one example of Spanish dancing music. That features a lot of hand clapping counterpoint from people that are watching. It's part of the tradition. I spent 3 months in Spain when I was young, and one of the things they did in one of the bars that we frequented, I would go there and I'd play piano jazz, and then when I was not playing, they had a guitarist and a flamenco dancer and some singers, and they would do their set, and everybody got involved in the hand clapping that accompanies the dance. And so everybody is playing a different rhythmic pattern, and they're all kind of weaving in and out of each other. That is also counterpoint. Let's see. I'm trying to see, is there anything else that is a question? I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing any other questions. Stanley Jordan plays guitar with both hands, tapping the fretboard. How would that be written out on a music sheet separate for both hands? That's a great question. I'm not a guitar player, so I don't really know. Stanley Jordan's more of a bass player. But it would be written out so that you know which hand is playing what. So there would be like LH for left hand, RH for right hand, and you would know kind of where you're tapping, and there's specific notational symbols that denote tapping in standard notation and also in tablature notation as well. So I could show you that, but we've run out of time, and I could show you that in Notion. So maybe we'll do that next Wednesday. We'll look at some different notational things in Notion next week. But otherwise, we are all done and dusted here for this show. I'm going to close the show in a different way than I normally would. And I'm going to explain what I mean. And what I mean is this. it is rapidly approaching my 50th birthday, which is in October. And recently, I've been thinking about a number of friends of mine, a lot of whom I grew up with. Either we went to the same school or we were involved in the same bands when we were kids, who sadly have not made it to their 50th birthdays. And so I've been thinking about them recently. And in the process of thinking about them, I actually wrote a new piece of music. It's not very long. It's only 1 minute and 20 seconds long. And so this will be its very first public performance. And I'm going to play it for you in just a second. And it's called They Shall Not Grow Old. And I want to dedicate it to the memory of all of those friends of mine who never made it to their 50th birthday. They are all sadly no longer with us. And I'm going to call two particular people out by name amongst all of them. There are, unfortunately, very sadly, there are many. One of those is, in fact, both of these I went to school with, and so I knew them pretty well. One of them was a young lady who was an absolutely outstanding musician. And she was a guitarist, she was a singer, she was a bass player, and she was a songwriter. She wrote her own songs and she wrote her own compositions. She was an extremely talented musician. She was also a very gifted artist. And she was a hilarious comedian. She was very, very funny, and she was a fantastic young lady. And sadly, she died last year. She died of cancer just before her 50th birthday. And her name is Jassy. I knew her as Jassy Elliott, but she got married and she had kids, and she was called Jassy Fletcher. So I'm going to dedicate this piece to her, and also to a friend of mine who was in my class called Glenn Thornton. Glenn was living in Spain and looking after his elderly mother. And sadly, he died very, very suddenly. He basically collapsed in a supermarket, when he was just doing grocery shopping, and died instantly. And so this is for them, and it's called They Shall Not Grow Old. Good night, everybody. I'll see you on Friday for the UK Studio One meetup, and then on Sunday at 6 p.m. for Sunday Night Live, as usual. Good night, everybody.